we believed that General Flynn was compromised with respect to the Russians. I believe that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General, if the President asks him or her to do something that he or she believes is unlawful or unconstitutional, to say no. And that's what I did.
The saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department.
A lot of people are disappointed in the Justice Department, including me.
Oh my God. Okay. Thank you. I think you just won the nomination, actually, or something.
Let's just stop right here.
Okay.
It's only downhill from here.
Welcome, Sally Yates, the woman who wouldn't back down. We just heard today another piece of news. How can we ever keep off our news alerts? That because of the raid, the FBI raid of the president's attorney's office, Michael Cohen, the president his legal team is now rethinking that whether or not he's going to be interviewed by the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller. So tell us, what are the implications of President Trump being interviewed by Robert Mueller or not?
Well, you know, I've seen lots of lawyers interviewed on cable news over the last few weeks about whether, if they were the president's lawyer, they would advise him to agree to sit down with Bob Mueller. And I'll have to tell you, I've been kind of stunned by this conversation because they're talking about it as if the president was just Joe Smith who's being investigated for bank fraud or something, and they're trying to decide what's the best legal advice. I mean, this is the President of the United States. He raised his hand and said that he wanted to be the leader of our country, and he asked us to entrust him with that and to give up some of our freedom. He's making some decisions for us. And so it seems to me, when the questions are so important here, it's about a foreign adversary attacking our democracy and whether he or members of his campaign were part of it. I don't understand how he would have the moral authority to lead this country if he didn't answer those questions.
Well, are you surprised that more GOP lawmakers don't push back against Trump's absolutely arrant, refusal to in any way, accept any kind of governmental norms? I mean, what do you see about the GOP in all of this kind of assenting circle?
And that's been a really disappointing thing, I think, in this whole process. Look, there are lots of policies of this administration with which I disagree. But elections have consequences, and you have to expect that there's going to be a change in policies. But it's the all-out assault on democratic institutions and norms that you don't expect, and that I think is, frankly, far more dangerous than any of the particular policy issues here. And that, to me, is what is so disappointing, that there have been so few Republicans who have been willing to step up and say, no, there's a line here. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in a free press. We believe in independent courts.
Well, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, has just said that he's not running for re-election. Do you see him as part of that sort of circle of assent?
I don't know about sort of ascribing it to particular people. I do think, though, that not speaking and not doing anything is a decision. And that makes you part of it if you don't speak up.
I'll say that. Well, you knew Special Counsel Robert Mueller, of course, for a long time when he served as FBI director, and you, of course, were there at the same time. Do you think he's going to be able to complete the Russia investigation? Because Trump seems like one Twitter away always from getting him fired or firing him himself.
I know. In fact, I think we probably ought to have somebody with a live news feed as we speak
I know.
now,
It's
just
probably
in case
happened
something
already,
else
actually.
happens, while we're talking. And that does create a tremendous amount of anxiety, doesn't it? I mean, it's been weeks now where I think we've all been holding our breath as to whether he's going to fire Bob Mueller or whether he's going to fire Rod Rosenstein. And it feels like we're teetering on the brink of the demise of the rule of law. And certainly, perhaps if he could do it and get away with it, I think he might fire Bob Mueller. I think he's been very clear that he'd like to see him go away and the whole investigation go away. I think it's a question of whether he can do it and get away with it.
There's been a lot of handicapping about the probable choice instead of firing Rob Rosenstein. And I'm not sure that people, he's the Trump appointee who's overseeing the Russia investigation, appointed by Jeff Sessions because Jeff had to recuse himself. And he's now on the hit list himself. So walk us through the significance, though, if Rob Rosenstein does get removed. What should we be concerned about?
Yeah, I think we should be just as concerned about the possibility that the president might remove Rod Rosenstein as we are Bob Mueller. And that's because the Deputy Attorney General, the DAG, as it's commonly called, actually controls the scope of the investigation for the special counsel. And so Mueller has to come to the DAG before he takes any big steps, and that includes searches or charges. The DAG also has control over whether a public report is prepared and made public, and also whether information is presented to Congress for potential articles of impeachment. So the Deputy Attorney General can control a whole lot of this, but what's even more dangerous and insidious about firing Rod would be that he can do all of that in secret because people don't know. When I say he, I mean his replacement could do all of that in secret. Because people don't really know what decisions the Deputy Attorney General is making. And the idea that you would fire the Deputy Attorney General essentially in retaliation for a search being executed on your lawyer's office, what did happen to the rule of law here, where the laws are supposed to apply equally to everyone, regardless of who you are?
And yet Rob Rosenstein did sign off on that raid, the FBI raid. It kind of was a kind of wonderful moment, really, because it made us all feel, I think, that there's a kind of growing resistance, which, of course, you were the very first of the resistors. You quit within 10 days. But is there
Actually, I didn't quit, but...
When you were fired. Yeah. I beg your pardon. Thank you for that. You were fired after 10 days because you resisted. But, do you think it means that the sort of judicial community are basically saying, we will not be patsies, there is a life beyond Trump? Do you think that it's going to be easy for him to find a legal patsy to do these things?
I think it's going to be difficult for him to do it. Look, I know a lot of the folks at the Department of Justice and FBI and worked with them for many, many years. These are really dedicated public servants. They don't view themselves as part of the resistance. They view themselves as committed to the rule of law, to applying the law to the facts and calling it like they see it without any kind of political agenda. And that's what we should want them to do, to call it just like they see it.
So we live in a democracy that's supposed to have checks and balances. Why isn't it working?
Well, actually, it's holding. The institutions are holding in the sense that courts are still carrying out their obligations, despite, again, the assault from the president trying to undermine the legitimacy of individual judges and the judicial system generally. The Department of Justice has been doing what it's supposed to do. The press is still continuing to do what it's supposed to do. But that doesn't mean that we're not seeing real damage here, because the loss of public confidence in these democratic institutions is really damaging. When the president tries to reach into DOJ on what's now become almost a daily basis, from trying to goad them into going after his former political rival to dropping the case on Mike Flynn or Sheriff Arpaio or whoever it is, the flavor of the day that he wants indicted, when he does that, the public starts to believe that the Department of Justice does operate politically, and they lose confidence in the system. And then where does that leave us for the next administration in terms of what those norms are? So even if the institutions hold, and they're holding, it's shaky, but they're holding, real damage is done.
Well, before you jumped into the public view in such a dramatic fashion, you spent 27 years at the Justice Department. Did you ever expect your career to end the way that it did?
No. I had started as a line prosecutor, and it's called an AUSA in Atlanta, and went from that to being appointed to the U.S. Attorney position in Atlanta by President Obama, and then was incredibly lucky to serve as DAG, and then ever so briefly as Acting Attorney General. And no, I never expected that, and in fact, did not want to end my 27 years with the Department of Justice being fired. But at the same time, I felt like to have done anything other than what I did and making the decision that I did with respect to the travel ban would have really betrayed all of those 27 years prior to that.
Well, arguments over the travel ban are actually going to be heard by the Supreme Court in a few weeks. How do you think this is going to end? I think people are somewhat confused about the state of the travel ban and what is happening to it.
Well, we're on travel ban 3.0 now.
Right.
The one on which I made my decision was the very first travel ban that was in some ways markedly different than this one. You may recall that when it came out, it actually applied to people who were valid green card holders, LPRs, here in our country. It applied to people who had valid visas. So literally folks are in the air coming back to the States from having been on vacation or otherwise, and they were being turned away at our airports, despite the fact that they had valid visas and green cards. There were other differences there, so it's unclear to me. They've done a better job at narrowing, in some ways, the scope of this travel ban, of laying out a purported national security reason for it. I'm still concerned, though, that it's infected with the same animus that infected the first one, which was the president's articulated desire to effectuate a Muslim ban. And when he said prior to his inauguration that, we're not going to call it Muslim ban anymore, we're going to call it territories. Well, that's the precise thing that he did with the first travel ban. And that I'm concerned that same animus, the racial animus there, infects all of them.
Well, you were Deputy Attorney General under both Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, and as we've heard, Acting Attorney General for 10 days. What is your assessment of the current Attorney General, Jeffrey Sessions, and what do you think he's accomplished so far? I mean, put that in a very neutral way.
Okay, how long do we have?
Go.
No, from a policy standpoint, I disagree with many, if not most, of the decisions that Attorney General Sessions is making. He has reversed the criminal justice reform work that we had undertaken in terms of charging and sentencing policies, in terms of prison reform. Certainly the emphasis on immigration and lower-level drug offenders is, I think, totally inconsistent both with a wise use of resources at the Department of Justice as well as leads to unjust results. And so, I could go through and tick off, many different policies with which I disagree there. But again, elections have consequences. Those are the policies that then candidate Trump articulated, and he was elected. So none of us should be really shocked that those are the policies that are being carried out now at DOJ. And certainly the lack of aggressive enforcement in the civil rights arena is one of the most tragic changes, I think, there. So I'm disappointed in that. On the other hand, I will say that Attorney General Sessions recused himself when he should have from the Russia investigation, and there have been other steps that he has taken that I think has reflected a respect for the rule of law. And so while I disagree on a policy standpoint, I'm kind of pulling for him right now with respect to the Russia investigation, because if he is replaced, it will be, in my view, for no other reason than to put someone in place who can then control the special counsel.
Talk to us just a minute about Robert Mueller, because you know this man extremely well. He's become, to many people, a kind of caped crusader figure, right? I mean, he operates in total silence and stealth. Things happen that nobody expected. He always catches everybody by surprise. How is it working with Robert Mueller? Can you tell us a little bit about what his process is to work with?
He is just the person that we should all want in that position. because Bob Mueller is he is a just the facts, ma'am kind of guy. I mean, he's going to look at the facts, he's going to look at the law, all of this Twitter stuff and all, it's rolling off his back. He is going to do his job, and he doesn't really care what the noise out there might be. And if there's a case to be made, he's going to make it. But at the same time, if there's not a case to be made, if there are really offensive things that happen, but they're not violations of the law, Bob Mueller is not going to try to gin up a case just to justify his existence. And again, that's exactly what we should want to happen here. So I have tremendous confidence in him, as long as everybody will just leave him alone and let him do his job.
Well, you obviously have this great passion for the law. It's quite clear to everybody here, I think. And you come from a very distinguished legal family in Georgia. Was it inevitable that you went into law? And what is it, why have you been so drawn to working in the Justice Department?
I swore off being a lawyer. I mean, there are lawyers on both sides of my family. My father, both grandfathers, even my grandmother actually was one of the earliest women admitted to the Georgia bar. And so when I graduated from college, I was of the view, I don't want to be a lawyer, I don't want to be married to a lawyer, and I really don't want a lot of lawyer friends. I am a lawyer, I'm married to a lawyer, and we have lots of lawyer friends. And so much for those great plans. But I was in private practice actually at a terrific firm in Atlanta, and went to the Justice Department on the recommendation of former Attorney General Griffin Bell, who was a partner in that firm. And he suggested that I go and try it out there and come back to the firm. And I thought I would do that in a few years, and I got to DOJ and had the opportunity to, and I know this sounds incredibly corny, but I mean, truly, the mission of DOJ is to seek justice, and that's it. It's not to convict people, it's not to win trials, it's to seek justice. And what an incredible privilege as a lawyer to have that be your mission every single day. So,
well, it's very different, as we know, from
leave.
what the atmosphere is now. And in fact, James Comey, about whom I know you can't really speak because it's all part of the things that are happening, but his book has just leaked, and he has really likened to President Trump's MO to that of a crime boss. Right? And he talks about how this whole atmosphere around Trump, he comports himself like a crime boss with the needs to have fealty and the needs to have complete loyalty in the gang and so forth. Is this how you see it also?
Well, that's a very colorful description that Jim has there for the president. Look, I didn't have as long a personal interaction with President Trump as Director Comey did, but I have observed from the outside as a citizen, just as all of you have, that he seems to view the Department of Justice as his own personal lawyers to carry out his wishes rather than being representatives of the people of the United States. And when you have a president who doesn't get that or just chooses to ignore that, that's a real problem.
And do you feel that we can go back to normal, as it were, when this president has gone? I think one of the things that is worrying people tremendously is this the new normal? Is this the new normal? Are we now going to have a presidency which is this daily reality show of breathtaking assaults on a norm that we thought was there to be, the presidency? Is it going to be as it is now?
Well, I actually think that's up to all of us. We can't control what President Trump does, but we can control how we respond to it. And I get that it's exhausting, and as you said, with the onslaught on a daily basis of things that just are not normal. But if in our fatigue of that we normalize this, then we're going to be the ones responsible for having this continue to be the new normal then after that. So I think it's calling them out. It's making sure that we don't normalize it, even in our, just our personal discussions with our family and friends and coworkers, that we make sure we plant a flag about who we are as a country and what we stand for, and we hold on to that, and we don't let anybody take that away from us.
Well, that's great. They clap you all the time. So now you're at the peak of your powers. You did not expect to, have ended your justice career in this abrupt fashion. How do you want to spend the next decade of your life, Sally? And how are you considering yourself running for office? You clearly are somebody who, a public servant who cares so enormously. Surely there is a political future for you.
Well, that's nice. I've been asked about running for office, and look, I clearly do feel drawn to public service. I mean, I think that's obvious, or I wouldn't have stayed at DOJ for so long. But I kind of feel like most people who run for office have always wanted to do that. There's sort of something inside of them that is driven for that. And while I feel drawn to public service, I've never felt drawn to running for elected office. And so, I said something a couple of weeks ago when I was interviewed that my husband really wants me to run for office. And so he has said, just don't say never. Just when you answer that question, don't say never. So, as I said then, in deference to him on this, I won't say, but I have a hard time seeing that.
Well, special circumstances can create special moments, right?
It sounds like you've been talking to my husband.
No, I'm just trying to warm you up here because clearly this reception here today. Looking back over your career at the Justice Department, what are you proudest of? I mean, I know you worked tremendously, as you said, on justice reform. We have an amazing woman later who is a formerly incarcerated woman who's going to be talking about reforming prisons for women. But what are you proudest of in the Justice Department? Because obviously you can't always be defined on the fact that you were fired by President Trump.
No, and it is a little weird to have spent 27 years there and yet to be defined by that, that last act. On the other hand, I do feel like it's reflective of how I tried to do my job for all of those years. And, part of what, from the time that I was in AUSA and had really incredible mentors there, when you represent the people of the United States, that's different than just being a regular lawyer, because it's really important that we went about doing our jobs in a way that would engender the trust of the people that we served. And so I guess I take pride in two things. One, in those everyday cases that I did when I was a line prosecutor, or those that I oversaw when I was U.S. Attorney, that I tried to make sure that we were always fair in what we did, that it wasn't just to win, but that we were treating people fairly. And then during the time that I was Deputy Attorney General, I worked really hard on criminal justice reform, whether it was in sentencing reform and advocating in the Senate, or in working with President Obama and the Clemency Initiative to adjust really disproportionate sentences that individuals had received who were lower-level drug offenders. And then a real personal passion of mine is prison reform. And we instituted some really significant changes, like building a semi-autonomous school district within the Federal Bureau of Prisons so that people can get the education they need to be able to be successful when they come out, and adjusting programming and halfway houses. The fact of the matter is that not only do I feel like we have a moral obligation to do that, to give people just those basic tools that they need to have a fighting chance to be successful when they get out, it also is absolutely essential for the safety of our communities to address recidivism. And so I'm always so perplexed when those programs are pulled and folks don't understand that the only way we're going to have truly safe communities is if we invest in people on the front end to prevent crime, and then in prisons as well to give them the tools that they need. So those two things would be, well...
If there's one thing that you could hope for now in this current unbelievable melee of what's going on, what are the things that we need to be the most alert for? I mean, every day we get a new assault, as we've discussed. What should we all be watching out for now? What do we have to be alert for so that we, in this audience, can actually, assert our voices? What do you warn us about, Sally?
Well, we've talked about this assault on norms, and certainly the rule of law and ensuring that the Department of Justice operates independently is absolutely at the top of the list for me. But there are other norms as well, with the assault on the press. And we all know how essential a free press is to our democracy, with respect for courts. But I think, to me, those are the things to look out for that I think are most dangerous. But out of all of this, because I don't want to be just a total downer here, but out of all of this, one of the things that's been most inspiring to me is all over this country, men and particularly women are feeling it right now and are plugged in and are paying attention to what's going on. And, people who never before would have been out protesting are doing that now and are really getting actively involved in the policy decisions of our country. I mean, just look at the Parkland kids. Is that humbling or what?
Yeah.
To see what they have done.
It's true. It's true. I'm very happy to say we do have Delaney Tarr and we do have Naomi Sadler from the Parkland Kids who are going to be coming tomorrow. So that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Sally Yates, you're very inspiring indeed. You are a big resistor. You are a hero. We're so honored to have had you with us. Thank you so much for joining us at Women in the World.
It was a privilege. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.